Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to go over all of my September and October reads. A lot of spooky books, some romance, some fantasy, a little bit for everybody. So sit back, relax, get a coffee, get a water, get a snack, and let's just jump right into it. Okay, going in no particular order, the first one we have is The Grace Year. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. This follows this dystopian world where during girls' 16th birthday, the whole year that they are 16, they go off together and live in the woods. The purpose of this is so that they can go into the woods together and get rid of all of the magic in their bodies so that they're purified and they can come back and either be wed or go off and work. It's a very feminist book about the way that people view teenage girls and women alike. And the story follows our main character living in the woods with all of the other girls that are her age. They have pretty much nothing. They're living basically on a camp. And it's very creepy. It's kind of one of those stories where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who to trust. Everybody kind of starts to lose their mind because they have no solid form of water, shelter, food, and they are very secluded in this like campground. It's a tiny bit gory, not too much. Like I wouldn't say it's like too gory to read. However, it is a little bit gory. It is a little bit creepy. It's a really great feminist fantasy slash like historical fiction because it's kind of reminiscent of like Salem witch trials almost. I recommend that if you are interested in something. The next one we have, which I'm currently in the middle of, is the entire series of A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. There are 3 books in this series. The last one is A Conjuring of Light, and that's the one that I'm working on now. I have the other 2 right here. So this is the first one, A Darker Shade of Magic, and the second one is A Gathering of Shadows. I think I gave them both 4 stars, maybe 4.5. So these books follow this alternative universe where there are multiple parallel universes. So for example, there are 3 different Londons. There's Red London, White London, and Grey London, and they all have different levels of magic. Our book follows Kel, who is able to travel between the worlds. His only job is basically to help communication between the leaders of the different Londons. However, he does end up being somewhat of like a smuggler, and he brings different objects between different worlds, and that ends up kind of royally screwing them all up. So all these books kind of follow Kel and this girl Lila Bard, who is from Grey London, which is technically like our London, like a human London where there is magic but nobody knows about it. Lila comes from there. She is pretty much a thief, like living on her own. She wants to be a pirate, and she stumbles across Kel. She steals from him, and the 2 end up working together kind of against their wills. It's really good. There's a tiny bit of romance, but it's mostly like a high stakes fantasy, and V.E. Schwab is just like a fantastic author. So if you're looking for high stakes fantasy to get into, I highly recommend this one. The world building is incredible. It's a lot of world building, a lot of politics and magic and stuff like that. So phenomenal series. I'm almost done it, and then I'm going to read the Fragile Threads of Power, which is like a spin-off. So what we have is Tender as the Flesh. Unfortunately, I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars, and the only reason I gave it 2 stars is because it made me feel a type of way, and I feel like it made me feel something, so it deserves some kind of rating. This is about this dystopian world where humans are now eating other humans instead of animals. All of the animals are contaminated and poisonous. Pretty much just what the government is telling us. We don't know that for sure, but we stop eating animals and we start breeding and consuming human beings. And the story follows our main character Marcos, who is working in a meat processing plant, and he is gifted a human being by his boss, who is supposed to be used for breeding, but he can keep the human being for whatever he wants. And it follows that. It's very weird, and it felt like there should have been a bigger message. However, there really wasn't one. Like, I really didn't find that there was like a huge message about like veganism and animal cruelty and stuff like that. It just felt excessively gory for no reason, so I really didn't like. The next one we have is Mr. Salary by Sally Rooney. Look how cute this little book is. Like, it's literally the tiniest little book ever. I got this in Scotland, and it's literally like 30 pages of like this size font. So I don't know what that would translate to, maybe like 15 pages of a regular book. This follows our main character Suki, whose mother died and her father is sick and basically emotionally unavailable, and she moves in with this older man while she's in school, and he kind of takes care of her. There's kind of like a will they won't they vibe between the two. Nothing really happens, and then we fast forward to present time, and she is studying in America, and she comes home to Dublin for the holidays, and she visits him because he lives in Dublin, and she spends the weekend with him. And that's pretty much all this story is: her coming home, visiting her sick dad in the hospital, and staying with this older man. And it's like a very weird age gap kind of dynamic. If you're into that, it's pretty interesting. It's only 30 pages, so like you could read it real quick. It was alright. I gave it 3 stars. Interesting read, nothing special. Next one we have is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is my current read, and I'm obsessed with it. I'm actually doing a reading vlog for this one. This is a mix of fantasy and Regency era romance. So this follows our main character who, as a little girl, she had half of her soul stolen by a fairy. So she has no ability to feel like sadness, remorse, anger, stuff like that. So she ends up participating in the London season with her cousin. The London season, if you're unfamiliar, is basically like the dating scene in London in the 1800s, and she has no ability to feel like embarrassment, shame, stuff like that. So she gets herself into all of these scandals, and it's super interesting. She is working with this magician. He says that he can find a cure for her inability to feel all of these things, so they are working together while they are also trying to solve this plague that is inflicting a bunch of children in London. It's really good slow burn romance, Regency era, and fantasy. I think I'm gonna give it a 5 star. Next one we have is Truly Devious. I loved this book. I think I'm gonna give it a 4.5, only because it didn't wrap itself up by the end. It's not a standalone. It is a series of 5 books, so know that going into it. However, it's phenomenal. It's about our main character Stevie, who is attending this super exclusive academy for high schoolers. She wants to be a detective, and she is going there because there was a murder, kidnapping that happened in the 1930s, and it's kind of always been unsolved. It's a very popular true crime case, and she thinks that going there she can solve it. So she goes to school there. She meets a lot of interesting classmates. It's a very eclectic group of people. One of them is writing a novel, one of them's a YouTube star, and they're all working together on this school project. And it kind of dives into the murders and the kidnappings that happened in the 30s. One of her classmates ends up murdered, and there's connections between that murder and the murder in 1930. So it's very interesting. If you're into YA murder mystery and dark academia, pick this one up. However, just be aware it does not wrap itself up by the end. You have to read the whole series. And next one we have is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. I love Erin A. Craig. She is literally one of my favorite authors. This is a story about this village that is very similar to the Gracie and Salem witch trials. This village is surrounded by woods, and all of the villagers are kind of kept secluded by the woods because there's a lot of myth and folklore about monsters lurking in the woods. Villagers go out into the woods to get supplies for the winter, and they don't come back. Animals come back badly injured. People go into the woods to try to figure out what's going on, and they don't come back. Crops are failing, people are turning on one another, and we find out that there are monsters in the woods, and they are granting villagers wishes in exchange for a small favor. And it is up to our main character, who is an 18-year-old girl, to figure out what is happening and to stop it. Meanwhile, she has met this traveler who came through the village, and she's very suspicious of him. However, there's like an undeniable tension between the two, and there's sort of a romance blooming, but there's a lot of suspicion about him and where he came from. So that's going on while this is going on. It's really good. It's very autumnal, very spooky. 5 stars. Next one we have another phenomenal read. I did really good these 2 months. This is A Dowy of Blood, and this is a Dracula retelling. So this follows our main character. She is this young girl living in a village. Her entire village is raided during the war. Her family is killed. Her village is basically gone, and she is on the brink of death. Dracula finds her, turns her into a vampire, and the story picks up from there, following their lives together over centuries, different lovers, different cities, and it's basically an abusive relationship told through the lens of Dracula. So if you're someone who really likes a feminist, toxic relationship kind of story, and you also are into like a spooky setting, you want something a little creepy for the fall, this is a great pick. I loved it. A little bit gory, not too much. It's honestly just a really beautiful story, and the writing is incredible. It's told in first person, and it is just so like eloquently written. I could not put it down. And the last one I have, Belladonna. I loved Belladonna. Belladonna is like a gothic fantasy slash romance, and this follows our main character, who is is 19 years old, about to inherit a lot of money from her family. Her family all passed when she was young, and she's spent her entire childhood going from family member to family member, kind of as an orphan. Each family member is kind of greedy and only after her money, and each time that she moves in with someone new, they die. So she realizes that she has this ability to kind of bring death with her wherever she goes, and lo and behold, she finds out that she is able to die and come back to life, and she's able to communicate with death, who is personified in this book. The story really starts off as she is going to stay in this big estate with a very distant relative, and it is her uncle, I believe. His wife has recently passed and his daughter is sick and almost dead. So our main character gets there, and she is really trying to figure out what happened to her aunt and what is happening to her cousin, and she's trying to solve what's happening. She assumes that she is being poisoned, so she is kind of taking her cousin under her wing and trying to figure this out. Meanwhile, she's working together with death to do this, so it's very like lyrical and beautiful because we have this personification of death, and death is like over and over repeated not to be a bad thing in the story. He's honestly a really cool character, and it's all about her grappling with death and her grappling with her ability to prevent death and grief and stuff like that. It's so good. It's such like a beautiful gothic romance and fantasy. I loved it. The setting of it's gorgeous. If you're into something like that, I really recommend that one. Okay, and that is it, I think. I feel like I'm missing one. No, I think that's it. Okay, that is it for September and October. Really good reading months. Hopefully November is too. I was gonna record a November TBR, but to be honest, I have no idea what I'm gonna read. It keeps changing. My mood keeps changing, so I don't want to set anything in stone. That is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.